Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a couple of announcements. Thank y'all for coming. On October 17th, we will have Dorothy Shaw and
Carrie Oliver.
Thank you. I went blank, completely blank. Carrie will be here, and they are going to be doing a presentation on how to write IRB forms. They did this earlier, I guess last spring. And so different forms this time. I think I heard the investigative progress report was one of them. But that Carrie is phenomenal in giving you pointers, Dorothy is too, in what to write, what the IRB is looking for to help us when we submit the right things. So that will be on the 17th. We will have a registration for that. So if you want to come, please register at crisptraining@uabmc.edu and reserve your spot. Yes. But we really had a good turnout the last time we did this. I think it was phenomenal. It even helped me. I've been doing IRB submissions for years, but it gives you the insights of what the IRB is looking for. So I think I really appreciate Carrie and Dorothy doing this again. I think it will be an ongoing presentation that we can cover multiple forms that we submit to the IRB. So that's October 17th. Then on November 12th, we will be sending out registration for this as well, but it's a date change. It's on a Tuesday instead of a Thursday, and it's in West Pavilion. But OSP has agreed to come and present to us on how to do an OSP submission, how to fill out their forms, and what they're looking for. So I know there's been notice that they've sent out that if the submissions are not complete, they're not going to even review it until it is complete. On this one, OSP has asked if you have questions that you want specifically answered from the OSP to please email crisptraining@uabmc.edu and ask your questions. We will take those questions and we will give them to, they're going to have several staff members, Benita Stokes, Renee Clements, they're going to give those questions to their team and they will answer those questions at this presentation. So it will be at the West Pavilion. There will be a registration. We will break out into 5 different groups. So we've reserved 5 different classrooms in West Pavilion, and they will go through doing an OSB submission. So that's November 12th. Then on November 21st, Terry Alexander will come and present what we can and can't text on HIPAA requirements, those kind of things. So that takes us through November, and then we have another research orientation November 21st too. And that's from 8 to 12 in this room. So there is registration required for that, but if you have any new employees that are new to research in UAB, please send them to research orientation. So, and if you have any suggestions for future speakers, please let us know on your evaluation forms. We would greatly appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over to Denise. Denise is an expert on CT.gov. She has spent countless hours learning the system and can help guide us into your submissions in CT.gov. She also has a team. Hannah and Dorothy help Denise on this, helping you to register your trials, to enter your results, and maintain and answer queries. So we are very grateful to Denise and her team.
Right. Let's see, let me make sure I get this mic on for the recording. I'd just like to welcome everybody again for your interest by attending the reporting results for clinicaltrials.gov. It's a necessary evil. Everybody's going to do it if your clinical trial meets the definition. So it's not impossible. I mean, it sometimes feels very challenging, but we can, it is doable, and we can get through it. And Dorothy, Hannah, and myself can help you. We're always there if you need some help. So I'm going to cover the high points of the template, and if we have time, I'm going to take you into an actual record so that you can see what it looks like. For the presentation, And the slides that you will have, I think that Angela, you will send those out after the program. So this will be a good reminder for you to use, a good resource when you get back to your office and you do have the, if you have the opportunity to have to report results, and you'll have, a guide to go by. So has anyone had the opportunity to report results at this point? Okay, so you have experienced those challenges. And I would say, between registration and reporting results is a little more difficult, but, again, like I said, it's not impossible. So with that, we'll get started. And this is actually what you see when you actually have an account and you have a study, and this study is open to the record summary page. This is kind of like the home page, and there are 3 different sections here. So the first section is really the record status section. So this is going to tell you where the record is at this current time. And right now, this particular one is posted and on the public website. So it's available for the public to see. The protocol section, which is right below that, is considered the registration section. So when you're registering a trial, you're going to go to the protocol section, and there are all of these various sections here that you will complete. So that is the protocol section. And then you have the reporting results section, and that section contains 2 different sections. The document section, which you're going to be uploading documents if your study meets the clinical trial definition, if you have to register, and the results section, which is just below it. This is where you're going to enter the data. So that's like a high-level view of it. So here are those 2 sections, the document section, and I can tell you that a lot of people, when they go in to register a study, they will see that, only certain studies have to, upload study documents, the full study protocol, and a statistical analysis plan. And sometimes they go ahead and do that immediately when they're registering. You do not have to do that. That is not required. The documents section and the full protocol and the statistical analysis plan is due at the time that you enter results. So you do not have to enter that early. Also, a lot of people are just upload happy and they upload their consent form. That also is not required when you register. It is actually a new requirement for us. And clinicaltrials.gov will be taking this off because that no longer applies. As you're probably aware of, the common rule this year went into place. And if your study is federally funded, and I will cover this in a minute, but if it's federally funded by one of the 15 agencies, then you are required to upload the consent form within a 60-day window after the last participant has completed their treatment. So you've got a 60-day window to do that. And we're going to be monitoring that. We've been talking with the IRB, and they've decided that CT.gov, the team, is going to actually be monitoring that and reminding you of when to upload your protocol or your consent form. So we'll be helping you on that. This other section here is the full data results section. It's closed when it looks like this. You have to physically go in there and click on this link, which opens up all of the sections that you're going to complete. So if your study is registered and it's time to enter results, you will have to manually go in there, click that link, and then it will open up all of the sections required. Now you see this below, delay results. So if your study, for some reason, has a delay, your results are not ready, and your results are due 12 months after the last participant completes treatment. So, and that doesn't mean that they get the treatment that day and that's the last day. It actually means that if that treatment is given on the last treatment day and then there's a blood test or there's another test or a monitoring period that they have to go through before that last participant is really completed, you count that period in there. You have to have results in hand, and then the 12 months start, because you will have 12 months to get your results into the template. Now, if for some reason you don't have the results, and that happens on occasion, you can actually apply for a delayed period. And they're very strict about this. I just had someone that sent in a reason to delay, or that they were unable to enter results. And they said, we're not going to approve it because of that reason. They just said they needed additional time for the analysis period. They said it doesn't give sufficient information, and therefore you're not going to be granted the approval. So we've actually gone back in and given more information, and we'll see if that happens. Typically they will be understanding, but they will not approve if the delay is for a pending publication. And a lot of people, a lot of PIs out there, they do not want to actually report the results and let those results be public until the manuscript has been published. So they like to, have the results posted after the manuscript comes out. But and CT.gov is onto that, so they say, no, that is not a valid reason. Okay, so moving along, once you click that link, the results link, so this is what you're going to see. This opens up all of the different sections, and you should be ready with your information to start entering into the system, because if you don't have your information ready, and I would recommend do not click that link until your information is ready, because you're going to have red flags all over the place. I mean, it's going to be highlighted, each section with red flags and information incomplete. But once you're ready, then you can go in and start entering the information. And these are the 4 really key sections that you're going to see. You've got your participant flow, which is basically the tracking of the participants through the study. You've got the characteristics, baseline characteristics of those participants, basically the sex, the age, and region of enrollment. Then you've got outcome measures, and adverse events. So those are the 4 key areas. There's a couple of other sections, but they're just basically looking at some minor information. So to begin, the participant flow, and like I said, this is just the tracking of those participants. Basically, who started, or how many started, how many completed, how many did not complete, and then the reason that they did not complete. In this particular example, we did not indicate that, but there are reasons that you can click on this link, and that will drop down, a drop-down box will appear, which reasons are that the participant withdrew, the physician did not feel like the participant should, continue with the study, lack of follow-up. There's about 6 or 7 reasons in there. And they like for you to complete that by, adding the reason that they did not complete. The numbers that you actually start with and end up, analyzing. So your number here, the people that completed, would be the number that they were able to do the full analysis on. And I'm going to point out to you in different places through the record, they pay attention to this number very, very much. I mean, that number needs to be consistent through the record, the same number. And if not, in each section that we go to, there is a reason why, or an area that you will enter what happened to those 3 people that did not, that were not analyzed. Up here, this is not required, but if you want to add information about the recruitment details and the pre-assignment details, you're certainly free to add that. And I pulled up the definitions for those areas. The recruitment details basically is the information that you can add that looks at the recruitment process for the overall study, such as dates, recruitment period, and types of locations. So was it at the hospital? Was it a medical clinic, etc.? So that information was added here. And then the pre-assignment details are just any particulars that are significant events in the study. For example, a washout period, a run-in, etc. This area up here, and this appears on every page as you go through, the definitions link, and that is a very helpful area to look at. The definitions for each page will identify everything that you're supposed to enter, exactly what type of information they're looking for. So that's a really nice resource to use. So as we go through the participant flow, you can see in the information that you entered during the registration phase, a lot of that information pre-populates over to the reporting results phase. So in the registration side, you added the number of arms that were in the study and the intervention description. And so that information translates over to the reporting results section. So the arms are all listed there for you. In this particular study, we've got 3 arms. The description, arm group description, has been transferred. And then the numbers down here actually are identified. Again, how many started, how many completed, and how many did not complete. In this one, there was just 1 that did not complete. And again, we weren't so good in terms of identifying that reason there. This is just a highlighted text box of the ARM group title and the ARM group description. So the ARM group title, they like for you to be descriptive with the type of either the treatment or the intervention that you're giving. So instead of just using titles like Group 1 or, Intervention 1, they like for you to kind of like label the intervention itself. So that's just an example I wanted to show. And here is just more information about that description and the title. Again, use a descriptive label. There's a character limitation of 62 characters. The ARM group description is they want you to provide enough details to understand what that group looks like, the makeup of the group. And there's a character limitation here of almost 1,000 characters, which is more than enough to describe. Just wanted to show some examples that when you have a study that has multiple periods in it, like they're going to get this treatment initially, and then they're going to transfer over to another treatment. You can add periods into the participant flow. And so this one happens to be a chemotherapy study with receiving a combination of chemotherapy during the first period. And then the second period was another type of chemo combination. And you've got your numbers outlined here for the various groups. This group obviously has 4 arms. This is a crossover example. And basically, you can see how it looks. You've got your phase 1 here at the top with the 2 arms. You've got your crossover period or washout period that you had, and usually that's identified as far as, is it a week, 2 weeks, how long is that? And then you've got your phase 2. Usually they swap over, so they're receiving, the first group receives the second therapy and the second group receives the first therapy. So there are examples of that under ct.gov that you can find if you are involved in a crossover study that you can use to look at it as you enter your data. Just a couple of tips under the participant flow. Abbreviations for the beginning of the reporting results section. Abbreviations are expected to be expanded the first time in use. And once you identify that, you expand the acronym, you put the acronym in parentheses behind the expanded word or whatever it is. And then after that, you can use the acronym throughout the record. But the same goes for the registration page. Once the acronym is expanded for the first time, you can use it as an acronym throughout the record. They expect you to do the same thing on reporting results. It has to be expanded the first time, and then you can use it throughout the record as an acronym. Believe it or not, we come across spelling errors a lot, and they've got a handy resource I'm going to show you in just a minute on how to identify those spelling errors. Again, your ARM group descriptions, information needs to be consistent throughout the sections, and they do not like any written results in areas that should not contain written results. They will flag a record for that. A lot of people will say, well, we had 10 people that started, 8 people that finished. These 2 people do not finish because of this, and so they will put that in a text box. They don't like that. There's places for that information to go. So they like for you to put it in the place and don't be redundant in the text boxes. And going back to the home page again, this is the record summary page. You can see here where I've got this highlighted. This is the spelling link that you can click on and see if you have any spelling errors or any acronyms that need to be expanded. So this is what it looks like when you click on that link. You've got your possible spelling errors at the top, and it will identify any errors that are in the record, and any possible unexpanded acronyms which are that have not been identified initially when they are mentioned. So that's kind of a handy tool to have when you're finishing up your reporting results, just to look to make sure everything is correct and there are no errors. Okay, any questions on participant flow? Okay. So the next section is the baseline characteristics. This is basically going in, looking at age, gender, race. You can actually add race. You can see these two are required. They contain the red asterisk, so you have to enter those two pieces of information. Race is optional, ethnicity is optional, region of enrollment does not have a red asterisk, but usually they like for you to have that in the record. So this is basically what you'll see when you open up that section under baseline characteristics. You've got the first section will be the age, and you do not have to use both of these. You can use just one, either the categorical, where you've got, between the ages of 18 and 65, less than 18 or greater than 65. So you can use that one, and you'll select which one you want to use based on how your data was entered. Or do you want to use the continuous age? And that would be your years or your mean with a standard deviation. And then you have your gender with either male or female, and then region of enrollment. Most of these are in the United States, so that's basically what we see. So again, under baseline characteristics, they're asking you again for the number that started. And so again, you want to match that with the number that actually started, and that is those that signed consent forms at the beginning. So that number is going to match the beginning number that you started, because people start to fall out after the consent form is signed. And then you've got your participant flow module, and that's where you go back to make sure you're matching that information. You've got your unit of measure, must be consistent within the baseline measure title. And usually that, if you're looking at age, you want to put, the unit of measure is age. And if you're looking at sex, it would give you those options to select. So once again, this is where if you, as you're reporting those numbers that started, and sometimes you have people that fall out, immediately after the consent form is signed, you would come into this baseline analysis population and enter if there are people less than the number that started here, just so the reader can understand that although we started with 30, we ended up analyzing 27, and so we had 3 people that dropped out. There's a place for you to enter that information on every page, and I think the reason that they do that is that they just want the reader, who is the public looking at the records, to understand that, to be able to understand that easily without having to flip back to the beginning of the record. Okay, that's baseline characteristics. I mean, that one's pretty easy and it's not too bad. Any questions there? Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Next is the outcome measures. This is probably the most challenging part of the record. So basically, CT.gov, they state up front that they expect every study that's reporting results to have one primary outcome and one secondary. But at the same time, they want you to put into your record every primary and secondary outcome that you have listed in your protocol. So if you've listed 10 outcome measures, you have to report those into the record, although they only require one secondary, or one primary and one secondary. They want the protocol to match the record. And as you're entering your results now, because this is your time to enter the results, after you do that, you're going to be uploading your protocol and your statistical analysis. And so, not that they have time to do that, but they would, or could have the option of going in there, looking at your protocol, making sure it matches. And they actually do have people that do that from time to time when they're doing studies, looking at, are there deficiencies in the records, from the protocol and the information entered in ct.gov. So, we haven't had too many issues with that, but, I would just recommend that you try to match the record to what you have in your protocol so that everything is good. So let's see, they start out, you'll see in a minute that they like for you to list your title and be very specific with your title. And they like for you to state what you are measuring and how. So they like for that to be in the title of the outcome. Obviously, there's a description that goes with that of how are you measuring that? I mean, is it a blood test? Is it a procedure? Is it, how are you measuring the metric that you're looking at? And if you're using a scale, they like for you to identify the scale, basically briefly define it, and then include the range of the scale. So if it's 0 to 10, on a scale with 10 being the worst and 1 being the best, they like for you to identify that so that the reader will know how to interpret the results. And then the other thing that is listed with the outcome measure is a time frame. So basically, the time frame is the time point for when the measurement was taken. So if you're starting your study, you've got your baseline information, and then you're going to take a measure in 4 weeks. So normally you would have your baseline as a separate outcome, and then your measurement in 4 weeks would be from baseline to 4 weeks. They are very specific with these time points, the time frames for when the measurement is taken. Most time points include 2 time frames. So from like baseline to 4 weeks, from 4 weeks to 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or however you're measuring. The only time it's not it doesn't include 2 time points is when it's baseline, because it's when you're starting. So this is what the outcome measures look like. You've got your primary outcome up here. You've got your title. And they like for you to really start out with number of participants you'll see a percentage of changes. A lot of people forget to put that in. It depends on the reviewer. Some of the reviewers are very specific and very strict, and they will flag it if you don't list it the way that they like to see it, and others are a little more lax. And so it just depends on who you get. But they do like for you to start out your title with number of participants that will have a reduction, or the percentage of participants that will have a decrease in whatever it is that you're looking at. Then you've got your description, and then you've got your time frame. So from baseline to 6 weeks. And then here is the outcome measure data that we'll take a look at in a minute.
Denise, I just want to say that so frequently in the title,
right,
someone will say 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. They list all the time frames
in the title. Yeah, and typically that gets flagged. They do not like the time frame to be in the title, because that actually is not where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be in the time frame. So they don't like to see information in other places of the chart. They will flag it if it is. So, yeah. Sure.
Didn't they make us like we couldn't put 12, 24, 30? We had to break it out. Each one title have a specific
right.
line.
Right. together. So like if you're, doing measurement points at, baseline 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, every one of those measurement points has to have, it has to be a separate outcome measure. So you would have your number or your title, you would have your same description, and then you would have baseline as one, and then you would have the second one, which would have the same title, the same description. You would have 1 month to 2 months, and then you would have however many measurement points you have. So the reason for that is because when you start this outcome measure, your primary, they give you, and you'll see it in a minute, only one data table for that time, that point you're measuring. So if you're measuring outcome, you've got one data table to put that information in. You don't have the space or the spot to put the 1 month results or the 2 month results. You have to create another primary outcome with the same title, the same description, with a different time frame. And they do have a nice little tool here that you can copy your primary outcome. If, let's say, you've got 6 measurement points and you've got, it's the same title, the same description, you can copy this 6 times, and the only thing that you have to change is the time point, which is great. It's helpful. Yeah, a lot of people, don't see that at the beginning. They're like, that's not intuitive. Okay, so this is the beginning of the outcome. You've got your primary that you've selected. You've got your title here, and you've got your outcome measure description, basically stating exactly how this is going to, giving a little more information on how this is going to be measured, and from baseline to 6 weeks. Then as you open that data table up, this is what will drop down below the primary and the secondary outcome. It again populates from the registration page the ARM titles, the ARM descriptions, and then all you have to do when you go in is to look at the overall number of participants analyzed. So that is the N number that you ended up with that you're analyzing, because you only analyze those that went from beginning to end. And so then in this analysis population description here, you would put that, that you analyzed, you were unable to analyze whatever that number was that dropped out because of, reasons identified under participant flow. And, if you don't put that information in here, they'll flag it. So they're very specific on those numbers. And then you drop down to where you put this is your data table. So you've got your measure type, which depending on how you measured, I mean, it can be a mean score, a median score, it can be a number score. So based on how you reported those results, you would select the appropriate, make the appropriate selection. And then there's a measure of precision here that you would select. And then you would put in those results based on how your results were, analyzed and how they were reported. So here, for this particular one, they're looking at the number of patients. And then down here under the unit of measure, they've selected you can select participants' years, units on a scale, a percentage of something. So if you were to select that, which is what happened in this case, a percentage of, and then they completed patients. It was a percentage of patients. So they completed that unit of measure, identifying what it was. Okay, so just some outcome measure tips in general. Again, just be specific with the title, description, and the time frame. The outcome measure title, as mentioned, to mention what you're measuring and how that is being measured, and then give a brief description under the outcome measure description. Again, the scale that we've talked about, and the unit of measure, make sure you're specific there, and the time frame in terms of 2 time points are specified in the time frame. And just a few more things, tips on the time frame and also the unit of measure. And these are handy things that you can go back to if you are sitting down, completing the results, some things to just keep in mind as you go through. And then again, the analysis population description, that is where you would explain the people that did not complete the study. And the number of participants analyzed is basically the same thing there. And so here we come to the secondary outcome, which is basically identical to the primary outcome, so that you really, I don't see that it's would be helpful to go through that because it's the same type of information. So this is, you would identify your primary outcomes, your secondary outcomes, and complete with the appropriate information. I added a couple of just flags that we typically see, and this is how they're reported. This is what they look like. They report errors or either problems, revisions that need to be made in the record, either using two ways. They either identify it as a major issue or an advisory issue. And we actually try to revise both of them. We don't really overlook the advisory. I know I hear from some people, they're like, well, the advisory issues, we don't have to fix that. And I said, basically they flagged it. They have issues with it. If we can fix it and it's an easy fix, why not do it? So let's just try to make it easier. It's for the public and for them to understand what's happening here. So here, this issue is the outcome measure information appears to describe more than one measure. That happens very frequently. And that's just what you were talking about with the time frame. If you don't, create separate outcomes for each time point measured, you will get a flag for that. And then in this advisory issue, the measure includes a scale that they did not include all of the information that was supposed to be included. And they identify all of that information that needs to be included with, what is the scale, what is it used for, what is the range of the scale, and which end is best or worse. Okay, and then on to another example. This actual primary outcome does not appear to be sufficient or not have sufficient information to understand and interpret what was measured and is reported. So basically, this one is not providing enough information to understand what they're doing, what this outcome is actually measuring. So sometimes they will give you some information on how to correct it, which is great. Other times you have to figure it out and how to revise it. Again, there's another scale that they flagged there. This is the time frame does not appear to be specific or in the correct format, so it gives you some examples there. And the outcome measure and title and description did not appear to provide sufficient information. Again, time frame, title and description. So those are the types of errors that we see. Any questions on outcomes? Okay, we'll move on to, Karen.
I almost don't want to tell you this, but I'm here now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm 2.5 years talking.
Oh, yeah. So I remember.
Sorry.
No, that's good.
So in our investigative protocol in 2007, we were of course late on. They threw in everything called primary and secondary measure that they hoped.
Right.
Throughout the protocol, they decided we don't need that. We got new information. We're not going to collect that. The protocol closed. It was missing. And we had no information.
Right.
So could it not include it because it was a secondary outcome?
Right.
There is a new mechanism now that you know you're going to collect the protocol team. It's like primary or something very important, or like our DOD is asking to collect quality of life. You cannot not.
Mm-hmm.
So you can list those things that you know you are primary and secondary, but if you have nothing
Right.
They do not have to report exploratory data. That's the things that you hope to. You don't
Mhm.
know how it's going to go.
Right.
They've thrown in things we've never even heard of. We've never heard of something like that. So that was very difficult.
Yeah, that was very challenging.
To open up the protocol and change the primary and revise the protocol we did not
Mhm. Right.
because they were not and there was no way we could.
But did the aims change? I mean, the aims.
The aims did because they went, like they started doing a different type of measurement.
Uh-huh.
TV to 3D.
Mhm.
So it was just in multiple things that happened and new information that came out that was happening.
Right.
And so they just stopped.
Yeah, I remember working with you on that record, and that was at the beginning when it was very, we were finding our way together. But actually, as we've moved through the process and have gotten to know better, this record, and I tell everyone this, that it's a fluid record. So you can make changes all the way through, based on the changes that are made with your protocol. Changes happen all the time. And so a lot of people think, well, I've put it in the record, can I take it out? Yeah, you can take that out. As long as at the end, when you upload that protocol, it matches the record. I had someone the other day that wanted to upload a protocol that did not match the record whatsoever. So, I mean, we have to change that protocol, and that protocol really is supposed to be approved, again, by the IRB, which those are other issues that I'll say for a rainy day, but right now that hasn't happened. They're changing the protocol at the tail end of the study and uploading it as they write it. But yeah, you can change it. A lot of times, people add in and they don't know when they're registering. They add in all the things that they think they're going to want to see in this study. The exploratory aims, the tertiary aims, I mean, everything that would be nice to have. Well, according to CT.gov, the things that you have to report on are the primary and the secondary outcomes. The exploratory, tertiary things are things that you don't, as long as they're identified like that in your protocol. So as long as it's identified that way in the protocol, that's good. But if it's identified as a secondary or a primary outcome, then they consider that to be obviously more important. So they want it to be reported. And then, as things change though, let's say you had an outcome that, well, we decided that was not important as it's a primary or a secondary as you're going through the study, and you decide we're not going to collect that data, which I think that's what happened with us. And you can put into that description, the analysis description, that, we, decided that this information was not important, or we were not going to collect this data as the study started. And that should be sufficient for them, because we've used that. So, and they'll accept it. But if you don't have something like that, if you have an outcome, let's say you have a study that you had 3 patients and you cannot recruit, you decided to shut the study down, you have to report on those 3 patients. They require that. And a lot of people try to say that, well, for the primary outcome, they did not get any information. But I remember this one, they did report some of the information. So it was apparent that they did collect the information, but it wasn't entered into the primary outcome. So that did not, was not kosher for CT.gov. They wanted that information in there. So, lots of little tricks of the trade with the outcomes. So any other questions? Okay, so next, the last section is the adverse events. And basically the adverse events are obviously where you report if any of those happen during the course of your study. So at the beginning, you have similar to the others, the time frame, the description, your source in terms of how you're reporting those adverse events, and the assessment type, systemic or non-systemic, which is basically, was it a formal or informal collection of adverse events? And this is the first part of the adverse events section where you basically identify those items. Your arms, again, populate over from the registration side. And then you have the next 3 sections that this is a new area that they started collecting about just a couple of years ago, but it wasn't there before. So all cause mortality, they've got serious adverse events, and they've got other not serious adverse events that they're collecting. So all cause mortality, and again, that definition link at the top of the page, you can go there to see exactly, is it a death that, came about, as a result of the study, or was it a death that occurred, had no link to the study? The definition is to include all deaths that occurred within the study. So you would have here where you report that there were no deaths. I mean, the number affected is 0. The number at risk, so in this particular study, you had 5 people in the study. So there was 0 affected, at risk were 5. Serious adverse events, the same thing here. You've got 0 that occurred, 5 people at risk. And then you've got your other non-serious adverse events reporting the same number. Now, this is just a different view of another study that had lots of adverse events, serious and non-serious. So you can see how they're reported here. They basically, and we'll look at this in just a minute, they like for you to identify the type of adverse event, what organ was involved, the number of events that occurred, and then, of course, again, the number affected and the number at risk. And all of that is reported for both arms, or for however many arms you have, and the same under the not serious. So this is the adverse event term, the organ system. I will show you that in just a second. And these are, as you can see, required information. Number of affected participants required, number of events. Some of these events are very hard, especially if you're reporting on things like nausea. How many times did, people experience nausea? That can be difficult like on a chemotherapy trial. But the number of events, if you can identify that, and if different from the overall per SAE term, the number of participants at risk, the source vocabulary name, and the assessment type. So this is basically what that looks like. You've got your adverse event term, so you would add that into that field. The organ type, which is basically if it's, let's say it's nausea. So you've got, it could be GI disorders, it could be general disorders. Let's say elevated LFTs. This would, the hepatobiliary disorder would be selected, and so forth. So this is what it looks like, again, on reported, the numbers, the types of disorders that they had, and they're identified with the overall organ or category of what was affected. And again, the same kinds of things under the adverse events with the time frame description and the number of participants that started. Again, some general tips on abbreviations and spelling errors, arms and groups, etc. So we've already covered that. These are, the last few sections, and this one, after you finish the adverse events, this is the next section that you would come to, limitations and caveats. So anything that, got in the way of not being able to complete the study, you would just briefly describe here. Any agreements in place by the PI, if that's the case, you would select the appropriate, make the appropriate selection here. And then you would come to the protocol and statistical analysis section. So this would be the time that you would upload the protocol and the statistical analysis. And really, your consent form should be already uploaded. Okay, just again, some information related to the protocol and statistical analysis. They want the full protocol uploaded, which means the protocol that contains all amendments. The statistical analysis must be uploaded. It can be uploaded with it or separately, and you can indicate that by selecting what boxes that they have where when you go to upload it, you'll see that. You know, one of the things that we see a lot of, people are uploading an HSP. HSPs are an internal document. They cannot be used for a protocol to upload on a public national website. So we are trying to address that now. And as mentioned, a full study protocol includes all amendments. So, you know, what studies have to upload? Those that meet that applicable clinical trial. So if your study meets the definition, then you need to upload it. Can you upload it if it meets the definition? Yes, a lot of people do that. And these documents, if it does meet the definition, are required 12 months after study completion. Okay. When you're uploading, the documents need a cover sheet with specific information as indicated here. I know I'm kind of running over, so I guess we still have a few more minutes. So the consent form, as I mentioned, this is new, that this was went into effect in January of 2019. This is the common rule that came out with the requirement of for us uploading the consent form and when that is to be uploaded. So if your study is federally funded, it doesn't matter if it meets the consent, the definition of a clinical trial or not. If it's federally funded, you have to upload your consent form. And the posting is no later than 60 days after the last study visit by the last subject. And we have identified that ct.gov will be the posting site for these consent forms. Just wanted to mention that, you know, as a institution, we just got a score this year for reporting results of 100%, which is the first time we've ever received a score like that. So this is a look at over 40 institutions, and the top, I think it's the top 14 received 100%, and the bottom universities, institutions, they were less than 100%. So we were happy to get that score. This was our 2014 score. And you can see in 2014, these are the institutions they looked at, and only one was 50%, above 50% in reporting results. All the others were less than 50. Our results at this time in 2014 was 38%. So we had a lot of work to do. And as far as contact information, if you need help, we're always happy to assist. And this is the contact information for myself, Dorothy, and Hannah, and our email and phone numbers. And this should be in the slides that you'll be able to get after the program today. And that is it. Since we're right up on 1, I am going to, you know, end the program now, unless there's any questions. I was going to take you through an actual record, but I think that, you know, we've looked at that good enough. So we'll just let it go from here. But any questions? Okay, well, thank you for your interest in coming to hear all about what's in the world of ct.gov.